Boost Mobile is now sending experts nationwide to deliver and set up customers' new phones.
Wait, we're going on tour?
We're delivering and setting up customers' phones. It's not a tour.
Not with that attitude.
Introducing Store to Door. Switch and get a new device with expert setup and delivery.
Delivery available for select devices purchased at boostmobile.com.
This NBA season, don't let an injury rule out your bet. With Fanatics Fair Play's first-half injury protection, Fanatics Sportsbook keeps your bet in play. Fair Play protects all first-half player props from injuries across every NBA game this season. So make the switch and stay in the game with Fanatics Sportsbook. Winning hits different here. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-522-4700. MD, visit mdgamblinghelp.org. Offer not available in all states. Terms apply. See Fanatics Sportsbook app.
China, in the 21st century, is now almost certain, as a result of the past 10 years, as a result of the past 10 months, and really as a result of the kind of like the past 10 days, to figure as the leading economic power in the world, if it isn't that already. Now, a lot of the historical processes that have led to this moment begin from 1978 onwards and the advent of Deng Xiaoping. And without understanding Deng Xiaoping, we don't really get to understand an awful lot about where China is now. The three consequential figures are Mao, Deng, and Xi Jinping. And Deng sits in the middle. Deng Xiaoping is a different character to Xi Jinping in a number of ways, and the idea coined that what we see is kind of neoliberalism, or the extremes of capitalism with Chinese characteristics, I think doesn't hold now. We see something else entirely now, but from 1978 onwards, that's certainly I think a valid argument, and that's what we're going to look at today. So welcome again to the Explaining History podcast, and we're diving back into an old favourite today, David Harvey's Brief History of Neoliberalism, where he looks at this economic, social and ideological transformation that gripped the world from the late 1970s onwards. And the book looks at four main figures: Ronald Reagan, Deng Xiaoping, Augusto Pinochet, and Margaret Thatcher. And Deng Xiaoping arguably had the most fundamental, world-altering role in the neoliberal story, but he's one that gets talked about far less. But let's dive in now. David Harvey writes, when Deng Xiaoping initiated the reform process in 1978, Almost everything of significance in China lay within the state sector. Obviously, Mao dies in 76. Deng emerges as chairman in 1978. He had been he and Liu Shaoqi had a period after the 62, following the failure of the Great Leap Forward, where they reorganized the economy and alleviated the worst aspects of Mao's famine. And Mao was sidelined as a political into the political wilderness for a few years, and from 66 onwards he comes back with a vengeance, kickstarting the Cultural Revolution, which swept his enemies in the party away, and saw Deng essentially sent off to do manual labor. I think he wound up working in a bicycle factory, and Liu Shaoqi is murdered. What Deng is initially looking to do when he comes to power is to help China to recover from the worst effects of the Cultural Revolution. China, a historically wealthy country, even after the Civil War, even into some of the first phases of Maoism, has been left in chaos and deep impoverishment by the events between really the Great Leap Forward to all the way to Mao's death, and that's what Deng Xiaoping is largely looking to deal with. State-owned enterprises dominated the leading sectors of the economy. By most accounts, these were reasonably profitable. They offered not only security of employment to their workers, but a wide range of welfare and pension benefits, known as the Iron Rice Bowl, or the state's guarantee of a livelihood. There were, in addition, a variety of local state enterprises under provincial, city, or local government control. The agrarian sector was organized according to a commune system, and most accounts agree it was lagging in productivity and badly in need of reform. Welfare arrangements and social provision were internalized within each of these sectors, though unevenly. Rural dwellers were the least privileged and were kept separate from urban populations by way of a residency permit, which conferred many welfare benefits and rights onto the latter while denying them to the former. This system also helped to hold back any mass rural migration to the cities. This was really, really important. The development of the cities was organized in such a way that it was intended to not lead to what the Chinese saw in other developing countries and in developed Western countries, of this kind of explosion of urban populations, slums, deprivation, poverty, crime, unrest, and all the other kind of negative sides of urbanization. This system also helped hold back any mass rural migration to the cities. Each sector was integrated into a regionally organized state planning system in which output targets were assigned and inputs allocated according to plan. State-owned banks largely existed as a depository for savings and provided investment monies outside of the state budget. The state-owned enterprises were long maintained as the stable centerpieces of state control of the economy. The security and benefits they conferred on their workers, though whittled away over time, kept a social safety net under a significant sector of the population for many years. A more open market economy was created around them by dissolving the agricultural communes in favor of an individualized personal responsibility system. Township and village enterprises were created out of the assets held by the communes, and these became centers of entrepreneurialism, flexible labor practices, and open market competition. Here are the beginnings of neoliberal reform with Chinese characteristics. These are the bits that you can, you can apply that phrase to China. And we'll look towards the end of this episode about how we can describe Xi Jinping's China. There are fundamental differences. A wholly private sector was permitted at first only in small-scale production, trade and service activities, with limits gradually relaxed over time on the employment of wage labour. Finally, foreign capital flowed in, gathering momentum during the 1990s. Initially limited to joint ventures in certain regions, it ultimately bore down everywhere, though unevenly. The state-owned banking system expanded during the 1980s and gradually substituted for the central state in providing lines of credit to the state enterprises, the town and village enterprises, and the private sector. These different sectors did not evolve from the agrarian sector. These different sectors, I beg your pardon, did not evolve independently of each other. The TVEs drew their initial finance from the agrarian sector and provided markets for outputs or furnished intermediate inputs to the state-owned enterprises. Foreign capital integrated into the TVEs, the town and village enterprises, and the SOEs, the state-owned enterprises, as time went on. And the private sector became much more significant both directly in the form of owners and indirectly in the form of stockholders. When the SOEs became less profitable, they received cheap credit from the banks. As the market sector gained in strength and significance, so the whole economy moved towards a neoliberal structure. It depends, I guess, on what it is we are describing as neoliberal. Neoliberal means many, many things, so much so that some academics don't touch the word, and it's kind of understandable. Neoliberal means, as far as I can kind of gather, in a kind of an umbrella term, really, the surrender of state and society to this kind of notion of market power, that ultimately the only decider on the allocation of resources, and therefore the only kind of valid ideological force at all, is that of market power. And of course, market power is a way of supplanting democracy with oligarchy, because in a market, the person who has the most power and is able to accumulate the most capital is the person with the most say. But in China in the late 1970s, there were certain firewalls. The state and the party are still all powerful. The idea that Deng Xiaoping and the Communist Party were going to surrender any meaningful power, or they were going to allow the power of markets to reap kind of such havoc as they tend to, that they would destabilize Chinese society. I don't think that was intended for a moment. What was intended was to find some way to kickstart China out of rural poverty.
The Scouting Report's in. Unlock the savings at Boost Mobile. Get unlimited wireless for $25 a month forever and keep your phone. It's a veteran move. Unlock the savings at boostmobile.com/unlock. $25 forever. Requires customers to remain active on Boost Mobile Unlimited Wireless Plan. For full offer details, visit boostmobile.com.
Consider then, writes David Harvey, how each distinctive sector evolved over time. In agriculture, peasants were given the right to use communal lands under a personal responsibility system in the early 1980s. Initially, they could sell surpluses over and above the commune target at free market rather than state-controlled prices. By the end of the 1980s, the communes had been totally dissolved. Though the peasants could not formally own the land, they could lease it and rent it out, hire in labour, and sell the product at market prices. The dual price system effectively collapsed. The key thing in not allowing any land ownership was the prevention in the long term of a landowner class from emerging. The Communist Party knew full well that small peasants would eventually be put out of business by bigger peasants who would become wealthy, who would become landowners, and as Marx kind of predicts, will eventually gobble up the smaller fish until you get a handful of very large players. What will they do with their surplus wealth, thinks the Communist Party? They'll buy political power. The moment that you allow the conditions for a capitalist class to emerge, a rural landowning capitalist class at least, and they put a lot of time and energy into shooting landlords in the 1950s, you will see the emergence of an oppositional political force eventually, because that's what concentrations of capital do. The story as to why China, which it now has multiple billionaires, has not seen a rival capitalist party emerge is an important one, and we'll see if we can find some time at the end of the podcast for that. But as you can guess, it follows much the same rationale. As a result, writes David Harvey, rural incomes increased at the astonishing rate of 14% annually, and output similarly surged between 1978 and 1984. Thereafter, rural incomes stagnated and even fell in real terms, particularly after 1995, in all but a few select areas and lines of production. The disparity between rural and urban incomes increased markedly. Urban incomes that averaged just $80 a year in 1985 soared to over $1,000 a year in 2004, while rural incomes rose from around $50 to around $300 in the same period. Furthermore, the loss of collective social rights earlier established within the communes, weak though they may have been, meant that peasants had to face burdensome user charges for schools, medical care, and the like. This was not the case for the most permanent urban residents, who were also favoured after 1995, when an urban real estate law conferred real estate ownership rights on urban residents, who could then speculate on property values. So by 1995, you are starting to begin to have that speculative aspect of capitalism, something that was absolutely and utterly the kind of the bête noire of Lenin, Stalin, and Mao, and speculative speculators were high on the list for most of the communist purges of the 20th century. The urban-rural differential in real incomes is now, according to some estimates, greater than any other country in the world. I think this book is published about 2006. Forced to seek work elsewhere, rural migrants, many of them young women, have consequently flooded illegally and without the rights of residency into cities to form an immense labour reserve, a floating population of indeterminate legal status. China is now in the midst of the largest mass migration the world has ever seen, which already dwarfs the migrations that reshaped America and the modern Western world. By official account, it is 114 million migrant workers who have left rural areas temporarily or for good to work in cities. The government experts predict the number will rise to 300 million by 2020 and eventually to 500 million. Shanghai alone has 3 million migrant workers. By comparison, the entire Irish migration to America in 1820 to 1930 is thought to involve perhaps 4.5 million people. This labour force is vulnerable to super-exploitation and puts downward pressure on the wages of urban residents. But urbanisation is hard to stop, and the rate of urbanisation stands at something like 15% per year. Given the lack of dynamism in the rural sector, it is now widely accepted that whatever problems there are will be solved in the cities or not at all. Remittances back to rural regions are now a crucial element of the survival of rural populations. The dire condition of the rural sector and the instability it is generating today is one of the most serious problems facing the Chinese government. When the communes were dissolved and their previous political and administrative powers were turned over to newly created township and village governments set up under the Constitution of December 1982. Later legislation allowed these governments to take possession of the commune's industrial assets and restructure them as TVEs. Liberated from the central control, local administrations typically took an entrepreneurial stance. The initial surge in rural incomes provided savings that could be ploughed back into the TVEs. Depending on location, joint ventures with foreign capital, particularly from Hong Kong, or through the Chinese business diaspora, also flourished. TVEs were particularly active in rural peripheries of large cities, such as Shanghai, and in the provincial zones such as Guangdong, that had been liberated for foreign investment. The TVEs became an incredible source of dynamism in the economy during the first decade and a half of the reform period. By 1995, they employed 128 million people. They centered grassroots experimentation, functioning as proving grounds for reforms. Whatever worked with the TVEs could later become the basis of state policy. And what largely worked was a surge of development in light industry, producing consumer goods for export, thus leading China down the export-led industrialization path. Only in 1987, however, did the state finally commit to the idea that development should be export-led. Accounts as to what these TVEs were about greatly vary. Some cite evidence that they were private operations in all but name, exploiting dirt-cheap rural or migrant labour, particularly young women, and operating outside all forms of regulation. The TVEs often paid dismally low wages and offered no benefits and no legal protections. But some TVEs provided limited welfare and pension benefits, as well as legal protections. In the case of transition, all manner of differences emerged, and these frequently had marked local and regional manifestations. So, what is the difference then? What is the difference between the Deng era and the Xi Jinping era? Well, I think one will always come up with kind of crude generalizations when one kind of attempts this, so do forgive me. But I think, firstly, the Deng Xiaoping era sees an explosion in kind of entrepreneurial activity in a kind of a quasi-private sector that is still heavily managed by the state in terms of the availability of finance and credit, the movability of workforces and that kind of thing. The state is involved and regulates. And you have the same thing now, but the explosion of inequality, which Deng Xiaoping viewed as being a sort of like an unfortunate kind of collateral feature of all of this. He said essentially, if you want this kind of growth, then you're going to have to expect those sorts of issues of inequality, of poorer healthcare and educational and housing opportunities.
The longer you stay alive, the longer you can enjoy Boost Mobile's unlimited plan with a price that never goes up. So here are some tips. Do not parallel park on a cliff if you want to enjoy an unlimited plan with a price that never goes up. Do not mistake a wasp nest for a piñata if you want to enjoy an unlimited plan with a price that never goes up. Do not microwave a hard-boiled egg if you want to enjoy an unlimited plan with the price that never goes up. stay alive and enjoy unlimited wireless for $25 a month forever with Boost Mobile. After 30 gigs, customers may experience slower speeds. Customers will pay $25 a month as long as they remain active on the Boost Mobile Unlimited plan.
This NBA season, don't let an injury rule out your bet. With Fanatics Fair Play's first half injury protection, Fanatics Sportsbook keeps your bet in play. Fair Play protects all first half player props from injuries across every NBA game this season. So make the switch and stay in the game with Fanatics Sportsbook. Winning hits different here. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-522-4700. MD, visit mdgamblinghelp.org. Offer not available in all states. Terms apply. See Fanatics Sportsbook app.
Those have been those issues have been significantly addressed by Xi Jinping's China. What is Xi Jinping's China trying to achieve? Can you describe it as neoliberal? Not exactly, I don't think. I think that a vigorous Chinese capitalism exists there, but whether you can describe it as neoliberal is a really moot point. Take, for example, the tech industry. And this is a kind of a brief anecdote from the first round of Trump tariffs, which I think were 2018. The Chinese government was seriously worried about these and called in the heads of the new Chinese tech industries and said, basically, lads, your time is up. You are no longer independent entities. You are essentially going to reach national targets, national goals that we set for you. Now, this is not analogous necessarily to kind of Stalinist 5-year planning. Think of it more analogous to Anglo-American wartime planning. You can make as much money as you like. Your enterprises will remain in your own hands. But here's what you're going to make. And what they were instructed to make was chip fabrication. And those kinds of essential tech industries. And tech industries that kind of predict where we are now. Tech industries based around national independence from global supply chains. As much as that can be achieved. Industries that are based around developing energy independence, industries that are based around strategic and autonomy, industries that are about reacting really to America's attempted chokehold of the Chinese economy. One thing that kind of creates Xi Jinping as we know him now, I think, is the stranglehold, the kind of the quasi-blockade that America is able to, or was at one point able to impose upon China, and building a country that isn't beholden to that again as much as possible. And I think that as time goes by in the next few decades, there's going to be a scramble for that sort of autonomy, particularly in terms of renewables. So there are many similarities between Deng Xiaoping's China and Xi Jinping's China, but one of the key differences is the way in which capital is managed and motivated. The reason why there are capitalists but no capitalist kind of class political formations. There is no capitalist party to represent the capitalists against the Communist Party, is because China's very, very wealthy understand what they are able to do and what they are not able to do, and what is tolerated and what is not. A great deal is tolerated, but the idea that a capitalist class can get itself together to own its own media and create its own political formations, that one's for the birds, I'm afraid. And The Chinese Communist Party are very, very clear on that, in sending people to jail and and imprisoning them for long periods of time, kind of a way. Okay, so I'll leave you there, and we'll check it back in tomorrow. We'll see we'll see what we'll see, shall we? Who knows what tomorrow will be like. I often find myself saying things on this podcast I never imagined I would, but there you go. History is a cruel mistress, isn't it? Catch you later. Take care, everyone. All the best. Bye-bye.
You're locked into a lot of things you can't change. Weather, traffic. Hey, stay in your lane! Your wireless carrier's latest price hike. But you can unlock a better way. Unlock the savings at Boost Mobile and save up to $600 a year. Switch to the $25 a month unlimited wireless plan. No contracts, no price hikes, and you keep your phone. Stop being locked into their games. Unlock the savings at boostmobile.com/unlock. Based on average annual single line of payment of AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile customers compared to 12 months on the Boost Mobile unlimited wireless plan as of January 2026. For full offer details, visit boostmobile.com.
Healthcare can feel complicated. That's why Optum uses technology to connect the people and processes that make healthcare easier, more affordable, and more effective. We're making it clearer for you to know exactly what your benefits cover. And to help you better manage your health, we're coordinating care between your doctors and your technology. We believe better, simpler healthcare is always possible. That's healthy optimism. That's Optum. Visit Optum.com to learn more.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Explaining History. This podcast is an independent production, and it's listener support that keeps these conversations going week after week. If you find value in the show and want to help cover the costs of research and production, please consider making a contribution. You can join our community on Patreon or make a one-off donation. Just follow the links in the show notes for this episode. Every bit of support is truly appreciated. Thanks again for listening.